Okay. Uh, Now I want to talk about something more topical. Very recently, we had a lot of speculations and just a lot of drama surrounding FTX. Um, but what we do know is that they have tremendous amount of liability that is being was reputed to being uh, reduced through paying off, basically taking money from one person and giving it to another person, which is not what should happen. If I as a trader deposit funds into an exchange, I expect the exchange to not touch my own money, or lend it out, or borrow money from, I don't expect exchanges to borrow money from somewhere else using my asset as a collateral. I don't expect exchange to, use what I deposited and use it to generate yield some other way. This is what's called a rehypothecation. It's a very technical term, but banks do it all the time, and we've seen a lot of banks, fail as well because they assume too much risk or they have too much liability, and only people who get hurt in those situations are clients and depositors. So it would seem that FTX had a lot of liabilities that they assumed that they thought that they had it under control because their fallback was the collateral in the form of the depositor assets. They shouldn't even take into account depositor asset as a collateral in the first place, but they did. What they should have done is they should use their own assets when they were getting loans or extending credit or acquiring companies or whatever. Depositor assets should be left alone, isolated from all of that. But that's not what happened. And the reason why this happened in the first place is because the temptation is so great. They had billions of dollars of depositor fund, and they were basically saying, salivating and thinking, what can we do with this to make us more money? But that's not their money to make money from, and it's unethical and irresponsible. And I don't want to keep finger wagging about the whole situation, but that temptation exists for every other exchange operators that are centralized. Even the decentralized ones, if the system is not designed properly, the operators of the exchange can halt certain activity or take money away or prevent trade or stuff like that. Um, all of those things are because traders are giving up control to the exchange operators. How does Project TXA solve this? Well, first of all, Project TXA is a settlement layer that has a functionality for self-custody, meaning you and I as a trader can just self-custody our own fund. But because the venue for the trade is off-chain, that still has to be mobilized, meaning that it has to be like the deposit has to be somewhere where it is collateralizing your trade in off-chain sources, which would be the exchanges or what we call participating interface. Tassin is building one such participating interface, what we call from the Tassin side an HDEX or hybrid decentralized exchange. But that HDEX sits on top of the settlement layer. So how this works is depositor deposits their own funds into their own isolated asset custody contract. Then when that event is detected by the exchange that are sitting on top of the settlement layer and basically says, okay, this person has this asset to be able to trade. Let's credit them on an off-chain source. Then as a trade happens, these things get broadcast over to validators that are listening, or what we call settlement data providers. And these are open source software that people can run on their home computer or in the server farm or whatever, variation of complex, different deployment scenarios. Um, when the settlement data providers receive the trade that has been executed, these trades already have buyer's signature, seller's signature, and the exchange's signature. So 3 signatures that confirm what the origin of the order, the trade is. And when a trader requests a settlement, that event happens on chain rather than having to request, withdraw from the exchange. So this is a different permission model, right? We're so used to logging into an exchange and, asking the exchange nicely to give us our money back. That should never happen. In my view, that the depositor's cash is depositor's own. The withdrawal and all of that process should be expeditious, and should not be asking the exchange's permission to be able to withdraw funds. That characteristic of a settlement layer, now when the withdrawal is requested, it kicks off what's called a coordinated settlement, and basically figures out what does Alice owe Bob, Bob owes Charlie, Charlie owes Alice, so on and so forth. And it creates a kind of like, what is the obligation of one trader to another trader in a peer-to-peer manner. That way, settlement happens between the traders and there's no one in the middle. We think that by having this kind of model, it provides a few tangible benefits. One is looking at a lot of the exchange shenanigans and ones that are currently ongoing. There are many exchanges that have agreed to provide proof of funds by providing transaction Merkle trees that proves that they have certain amount of funds that they deposited. But that's good, but it's still insufficient. We think that by having a settlement layer and a true self-custody of a trader's fund, so letting traders handle their own custody, that and not allowing exchanges access to those funds at all, other than recognizing that they're available to be traded, will make the system in a such way that, one, there is no secondary lending activity that uses trader funds as a collateral. Two, we know exactly what the total asset for all of the traders involved in that settlement layer, without having any questions about whether the exchange is fully, one-to-one, have those funds available for traders to be able to withdraw. And because the only time that the withdrawal is even possible is through a direct request from a trader, meaning that the exchange cannot ask the settlement layer, hey, can we have access to such and such funds so that we can lend it out? The answer is no. There's no such functionality available, and we will double, triple, quadruple, make sure that the deployed contract adheres to exactly what the trader's expectation is. This is already open source, the asset custody contract. We're in the process of doing internal and setting up the external audit for these things. And what we also intend on doing, provided that it makes it easier for us to deploy, is non-upgradable contract, so that when we deploy the contract for first time and have that contract audited, that is exactly what's there, and we can't change it after it's been deployed. And I think that that additional level of assurance would mean that rules cannot change on the fly, because a lot of times, even though some of these things are decentralized exchanges, the contracts and their logic gets replaced all the time. So we don't really know who has control at what point, at what time, and I don't think that's good for the industry, and certainly not for the trader. I trade a lot, and I'm just trying to make sure that if I were a trader, what is the best possible trader experience I can have? One of them is not having to worry about where my money is going to be next day. I've been reading a lot of tweets from um, veteran traders who has had, 7, 8, 9 figures worth of funds in FTX, and they don't have access to it. And that is unacceptable. In my view, client funds should be sacrosanct. They shouldn't have been even considering touching it. But for whatever reason, they decided to do that. And I suspect that it's because of the temptation that arises from having access to such a large pool of cash, even if it's not theirs to begin with. And um, I would hate to see. I also hate to see a lot of victim shaming where people are saying, oh, it's your own fault for not doing self custody. Well, you have to balance the utility of being able to trade on the fly versus self custodying and putting in a cold wallet. And for the traders, optionality of being able to trade immediately is very important. And so then for traders, they're left with very little option, where they don't have a venue that is fast enough for them to trade, which is DEXs, current generation of DEXs. So then they're left with taking a risk with what was supposed to be one of the most reputable exchanges out there. And so if FTX can fail like this, then really none of the centralized exchanges out there are safe. I think that custody risk is extremely difficult to calculate. I mean, I wouldn't be able to even begin. What is my risk? Is it 1.8% default rate, or is it 5% default, meaning like possibility at every day that something's going to go wrong, right? That you're not going to have access to it. No one can quantify that accurately, not even the insurance companies. In fact, that the FTX's depositor insurance, that the firm that allowed traders to open for catastrophic events like this, their chance of the exchange failure was roughly around 2%, which is very low. In fact, I believe it was less than 2%. So given that such low premium, they were thinking the chance of this happening in a very low manner. There's a fantastic book by Nicholas Nassim Taleb, he talked about Black Swan, which is basically exactly what happened. People underestimate how often very rare events happen, also known as black swans. So if you go outside and look at a pond and you see a lot of swans that are white, but what is the likelihood of there being a black swan? We don't really know unless you seen your first black swan and then look at the events on a very long time period. Then one will be then able to characterize something resembling a possibility of seeing a black swan. But because these things are rare within the lifetime of a person or within the lifetime of a company, it's very difficult to engage in estimation of these kind of risks, especially custody risk. And so people take chances. It's just basically every day they're taking chance that something is going to not go wrong, and that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable because these are people's hard-earned cash. I talk about veteran traders getting bamboozled out of 7, 8, 9 figures, but there are also retail traders who should be afforded just the same amount of protection that the veteran traders are, but apparently not. It's become now there's a lot of stories, of course, a lot of rumors, and one of the rumors is that the institutions were able to get their money out first. Some of them that were close to FTX already, which is mind-bogglingly absurd. I think that number one, this situation of picking who gets to withdraw first when they should have been treated uniformly the same is just another symptom of like this architectural problem, and also the incentive problem, and also the operators. So meaning like even if the incentives are there, the operators should not have acted on that. That's just a matter of virtue and ethics. But the architecture also allows selective treatment of their depositors, which is not fair. So I think that what's ironic is that DeFi is the solution here. Web3 is the solution here, rather than having everything centralized in one giant pool of cash where controller of that cash is different than person who actually owns it. What Project TXA aims to do is eliminate that problem altogether and have the exchange focus on just building a fastest possible order book, or best possible platform to trade on, or providing lowest possible fees, or whatever the differentiation factor is in user experience and customer satisfaction, rather than doing this stupid thing with, oh, you know what, we're going to take depositor money and lend it somewhere and make little bucks. That's just not acceptable in my view.